Hey there, welcome to Old Man Runner. In today's video, I'm going to look at another metric, ground contact time. First, I'm going to try to define what ground contact time is. Then I'm going to look at how it varies across different speeds, terrains, and across different shoes. And finally, I'm going to see if this particular metric matters. I'm making this video because I like metrics and I use various devices to capture them, including the watch and the Stride FootPod. When I was younger, I used to run in London with my friend Angus, and he would just fly across the ground. He was a county runner and he barely touched the ground, whereas I'd be plodding along and sinking deep into it. And so I've always been interested in how long your foot stays on the ground and what effect that has, and whether I can do anything about it and maybe become a little more fleet-footed. So what exactly is ground contact time? Well, it's the amount of time your foot is in contact with the ground, measured in milliseconds. It varies across terrain, across shoes, and across speeds. And it's one of the advanced metrics I can get out of my Stride FootPod. One thing my Stride FootPod can't measure is my ground contact balance, the balance difference between my left and my right foot. It's something I'm interested in, but the Stride can't measure it because effectively the Stride is put onto one shoe. Chorus make a FootPod. Well, it's not a FootPod, it's a pod, but it goes on the back of your waist, hence it's not a FootPod. And it can tell your left and right balance, but what it can't do is measure the wind. Now, it's pretty windy in Ireland at the moment, so I do want to get the wind measurement of the Stride, so we'll come to left-right balance another day. Ground contact time is affected by your gait cycle. So if you're a heel striker, you'll spend more time going through and on the ground than if you're a forefoot striker. So the angle at which you hit the ground, all these kinds of things make an effect. So I'm expecting that in the various tests I'm going to do in this particular video that I would be longer on the ground, possibly because I'm actually striking more towards my heel. Cadence, or the amount of steps you take per minute, is inextricably linked to ground contact time. A typical target cadence that people say is the ideal cadence is about 180 steps per minute. I'm pretty close to that most of the time. I mean, I can exceed it when I'm going quickly, but my problem seems to be my short legs. I have a small stride, and that's annoying me, but there's not a lot I can do at this stage, apart from maybe get a pair of stilts. But they're linked, and you'll see that as we do some of the testing, and we'll see what we could try and do about it. All metrics have ideals, and in ground contact time, 200 to 300 milliseconds is normal for a runner. Sub 200 milliseconds is elite. So it's time for the testing. We're going to go out and test various shoes, various scenarios, and see how we get on and how many milliseconds I actually take and what sort of is influencing it. Time for the testing. I tested various shoes in various situations. Typically, I went to my local park, the Shonmore Park, and did my 1K loops. And then what I tried to do was I did them at various speeds, which you'll see. And then what I did was I topped out the start and end piece so that you could get a data set over a consistent pace pretty much, and then get an idea of the ground contact time, which I got from the Stride FootPod and which you can see on the web app. I measured, I'm really looking to look at cadence and ground contact time, but I've also put in elevation and pace in the images. Now, as in all of these tests that I do, there's a limited data set. There's only me. There's only so much before I can burn out. So I don't think you can read too much into them. I mean, it's kind of like a flyer, not kind of Ulysses. So think of it like that, a bit of lightweight stuff, and we'll see how we get on and see if we can draw any meaningful, but, you know, not in-depth conclusions. For the 1 kilometer walk and gut buster, so I'm going at walking pace and then as fast as I can go for a kilometer, I picked the Nike Zoom X Alphafly Next Percent. Mainly because I'd already done the 1 kilometer gut busting one that's in them, and I thought, look, save myself a bit of effort and use the data twice. Anyway, I did them in these, and what you'd expect is that there'd be a higher ground contact time when you're walking. That's exactly what happened. So in the 1 kilometer walk, I had 990 milliseconds ground contact time, but 122 steps per minute in cadence. And then when I did my gut busting 1 kilometer, I had 189 milliseconds for ground contact time and 200 steps per minute. So as you can see, the cadence, when I sped up, the cadence went up and the ground contact time went down. And yeah, down to 189 milliseconds and 200 steps per minute is pretty good. If only I could keep that going for longer than a kilometer, if only. So we know that the ground contact time from that previous one, we know the ground contact time and the cadence are linked. So I tried to go for a quick sprint to see how fast I could go and how low I could go anyway. But in a quick sprint, I could get down to 154 milliseconds ground contact time and 228 steps per minute. Now I'll put all of these numbers down below in the description so you can click on them if it's of interest. But again, it shows that the cadence, as the cadence increases, the ground contact time decreases. Now whether that's causal or coincidental, I don't quite know. But you might have a view and pop something in the comments, and so we'll roll on to the next test. Again, if only I could sprint for longer at those speeds, it'd be great. Last year, around the time I started to get interested in ground contact time, I also bought myself a pair of these, the Hoka One One Clifton Edges. And what I discovered these were brilliant for was running in the dark at night over uneven ground, because they have a huge foot plate. Easily the biggest foot plate of any shoe I have. So I've decided to compare them to these. The base model Atreyu, the Battle Lies Within colorway, which I really love, has a very small foot plate. So I figured if I ran both of them at a modest speed over the same course, over the same distance, and then compare them, would the Clifton Edge have a greater ground contact time? So I ran at 5 minutes 25 a kilometer, or 8 minutes 43 per mile, and yes indeed, the Clifton Edge has a 264 millisecond as opposed to the Atreyu's 255 millisecond at 177 steps per minute for the Clifton Edge and 178 for the Atreyu. And again, all of this stuff will be down below. So I think it's fair to say, yeah, the bigger foot plate does seem to, at least in this test, have a larger ground contact time. I mean, I suppose all these tests become a bit self-evident after all, but we'll crack on. Then I decided to look at light versus heavy. So I picked this beast, the Nike Zoom X Invincible Run Flyknit. Nike always have these really long names. Anyway, I took this, which is pretty much my heaviest sort of road shoe. It's a beast of a shoe. So I took this. I mean, it's 366 grams or 12.9 ounces in weight. As I took them against the Atreyus, which are 207 grams and 7.3 ounces. So heavy versus light. And yeah, unsurprisingly, I suppose, these had a ground contact time of 260 milliseconds at 176 steps per minute, as against 255 milliseconds and 178 steps per minute in the Atreyu. So then I decided to test low stack versus high stack, and the best way I figured to do that was using the same shoe. So this is the Cime Alpe 864. I won't murder the French language again. And again, all of these shoes that I'm doing have had separate reviews on the channel, so you can have a look at them in detail. But these ones have interchangeable liners. So I ran them in the 4mm liner, and I ran them in the 8mm liner. So that changes the angle of attack. I don't think I can read too much into this, but yeah, in the 8mm configuration, it was 256 milliseconds, 176 steps per minute. And in the 4mm, it was less. It was 253 milliseconds, 177 steps per meter. Again, I'm trying not to read too much into this, but the lower drop seemed to have a very slightly lower ground contact time. The previous tests were all done at pretty much flat ground, low level. And I decided to go uphill and downhill. So I took a data set from some runs I've been doing around Howth Head, which is a nice scenic headland just to the north of Dublin. So I do a 10K loop. I go 2 kilometers uphill to 137 meters straight at the start. It's ramped from the start. So that's 450 feet in 1.24 miles. So it's pretty steep. It's about at 5 to 6%, I think, on average, gets up to 16 and a few gnarly parts. And I've been trying to do that in these shoes, partly because I wanted to see what they'd be like. I don't think they'd be well suited to hills, but I decided I'd give them a go. And also because somebody in the comments had wanted me to run these to 80K or 50 miles. And so I figured that was a good way to start. So we can have a look at the data set from that again, because it's 2K uphill and then it's pretty much 2 downhill the other side. I suppose that's the reason, doesn't it? I took a data set, a kilometer on the up and a kilometer on the down. Let's see what the difference is. It's in this data set that you can see the ground contact time not having exactly the same relationship with the cadence. So the cadence on the uphill was 176 steps per minute, and downhill was 173 steps per minute. I was just sort of going fairly gently along because I was doing 20k, I was doing 2 loops. So I took these from the first data set. But essentially it's pretty much the same cadence up and down, but the ground contact time was noticeably different. On the uphill, it was 283 milliseconds. On the downhill, it was 261 milliseconds. So that was quite significant in that the ground contact time was much greater when you're going up the hill. So I suppose it's just you're planting more as you go into the hill. And then one of the things I thought is interesting is in the data set. So I'll just show this data set, which is just pace and ground contact time as I go down the hill. And you can see how related to each other they are. One's going up as the other's going down. So as the pace goes up, the ground contact time goes down. So it's kind of interesting. It's one of the reasons I like playing around with all this data and all these graphs. I mean, the one thing I learned out of the running up was not to run on these on the hills. So I'm going to be doing a race around them a couple of weeks, maybe next week. Doing a race around against my friend Con on the bicycle. So I'm going to try, not running these. I'm going to go for my Asics Metaspeed Edge, which have a low stack height and a carbon fiber plate and are lightweight. So that's one of the things I learned out of this test is how to pick a different shoe based on what you think the ground contact time might be and the various variables. At the start of the video, I wondered whether ground contact time matters. When your foot is on the ground, it's not like you're stationary. You're rolling through the gait cycle, but really you're faster when you're going through the air. What I like to call you're applying your fast force forward. That's what you want to do. Fly through the air, fleet feet. It's hard to train for ground contact time. I mean, how do you say to yourself, well, I'm going to reduce 260 milliseconds to 176. I mean, if you didn't have these foot pods, it'd be very hard to measure. But what you can do, we've seen that cadence relates to ground contact time. And you can definitely work on cadence. You can try speed work, plyometrics. I'm going to get out the old metronome. There's a metronome on this course pace too, and have a go. Because although my cadence is pretty high, my short legs doom me to failure. So I'm going to have if I try to lengthen the stride too much, then what happens is that you're not landing on the center of gravity as much, and your foot is acting as brake, and ultimately I think I've just got to make the cadence go even quicker. So if my cadence goes up, my ground contact time goes down, and my speed will go up. So yes, ground contact time matters. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it useful. If you did, it'd be great if you hit the like button. There's lots of stuff and all the data is down in the description below and details on all the shoes. If you have any questions or comments or disagree with half the stuff, pop it into the comments. There'll be a blue subscribe button popping up there and some related videos there. Thanks for watching. Until the next video, just keep running along.